welcome to Agile World. Hello, Carl. Been a while.
Well, that was my line. I feel dejected now.
I haven't done it for so long. I just got too excited. I just got
all
far
right,
too
that
excited.
is true. That's true. So you've been on holiday all year. That's amazing. How did you manage to get away with that?
Wow. Wow, that's another level. I've been working with you in the background. We've got some secret stuff coming.
Secret sauce. Well, we have kind of a full house today. Welcome, everyone. And we're actually here to talk about the Agile Culture Report and Survey. Really exciting. Let's find out who's on the call. Pam, could you introduce yourself?
I can, thanks, Carl. So I'm Pam Ashby. I'm a marketer, but I'm strategist at the Agile Business Consortium. I'm an Agile coach and a life coach and an Agile evangelist.
Emily, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm a colleague of Pam's. I'm working with the Agile Business Consortium as propositions lead, so part of the marketing team and the SOAC team.
Okay. Simon, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Simon Stapleton. I'm Chief Exec of Truth Sayers, and it's our technology that's powering this survey, just like the last 2 years.
Great, thank you. Ben?
I'm Ben. I'm an enterprise agile coach and working at Jacob. I'm normally responsible for running the various transformations that we support our clients with, and I've been involved with SOAC since its inception. So excited to be here today.
And last but not least, Georgie.
Thanks,
Sorry,
Carl.
I don't know that one.
I'm Georgie. I'm a manager, consultant, and agile coach at Jacob. And as Ben said, we work with a range of clients for a management consultancy that strive to grow organizational agility.
Excellent. And I'm sorry that my Alexa butted in then. It likes to be involved and not left out of things. So apologies, everyone. So let's get going. Why Agile culture? Why are we focused on this? Who wants to answer that question and sort of lead in?
I can go if that's helpful. I'm going to share my screen as I think the slides will help me talk to this a little bit. But can you guys see my screen okay?
Yes.
Perfect. So I guess the benefits of Agile culture are widely recognized, but we still see some difficulties with our clients, especially with its adoption. And I think the graph on the left-hand side that's on the screen currently, this is research from the State of Agile report. And historically, this report cited that company culture being at odds with core Agile values is the top reason that Agile transformations fail. And when we started doing our own research, we found that nearly 50% of respondents said that this was their biggest challenge to successfully implementing Agile. So we know that Agile culture is really important. Furthermore, in our research, we found that organizations with a stronger Agile culture outperformed their counterparts. And so I guess with all of this information, we've known that Agile culture especially is really important. And that's why we sort of have been doing this research for the last few years.
Actually, I'm not surprised at the outcome, because it's something when I'm going into clients, I'm finding the same situation. So it's actually good that we've got some more raw data on it.
Is this the classic thing that Agile is for somebody else and not me? Especially from leadership, or am I not allowed to say that online?
The data from this year, and it's also true the data from the previous 2 times we've done it, is there seems to be a big disparity between the C-suite and the senior leadership layer. The C-suite think everything's great, we're from an Agile perspective that things are going really well from an adoption and from a behavioral perspective, but it's the SLT who are really feeling the brunt of it. But as the evidence would suggest, that they're feeling much less supported and much less positive about Agile transformation projects. And actually, I think it's that leadership that between those 2 tiers is where potentially the big gains can be made from getting those 2 tiers in sync.
It seems very frequently to be the case that leadership think, oh, well, this is something for the teams. We want the teams to work in an agile way, and they typically underestimate the impact that it has on them, and that they're really those that lead the values and how the behaviors play out those values across the organization.
Yep, and I was just about to say exactly the same thing. It's what I'm seeing. I'm finding now that my first stage when I go into a client is to actually, I'm making a beeline for the leadership, the C-suite guys. I find I have to do I feel like it's a harder sale to convince them that, yes, they bring me in to work with their team levels, but actually trying to explain to them the importance of their actual role, and especially when it comes to agility. And it's great now that I've seen noticing that people are starting to listen to it more now, but I don't think we are quite there yet.
I think it's easy as well, because I think the challenge, the cultural challenge in organizations is huge, and ultimately the mechanics are reasonably well established at the team level. And Carl, I apologize for using the word, but as you scale it as well, that is becoming a lot more mature and a lot more established. But embedding it into the ways of working so that people think and feel and behave in a way that is more agile, that's the job of the culture. And that's why we've got to bring the culture along. The leadership are the people that are creating that environment. It's super easy to point the finger at leadership and say, well, do you know what, leaders, you need to get on board. You need to understand your role in this. You need to change your behaviors. But they're in their position because they've been pretty well established, and they've obviously performed very well to get to that level. So I think as coaches, as people driving these transformations in the organization, we've got to go on that journey, or take the leadership on that journey. And I think the key pieces in here is, where we're calling out the biggest challenges with strengthening your organization's agile culture, are leadership awareness, understanding, and support. And we've got to help them build that awareness. So we've got to make sure that they're aware of the impact of their behaviors and how they need to support the organization. We need to get them to understand it, but understand it from their perspective. We can talk to them about Scrum, but they probably don't care. We need to talk to them about how their role influences and what their role is a leader in there. And we need to support them with it. We need to be there to take them on this journey, because it's not easy. It's challenging. It can be pretty frustrating at times. So we've got to make sure that as coaches, we're there creating that safe environment for them so that they can experiment and learn, because that's going to be what drives the change in the culture.
And
so I'm actually a C-suite consultant. So Sabrina and I do portfolio level, and Sabrina does everything else. But the C-suite actually don't really care about agile at the moment. What they have built careers, as Ben quite rightly says, over the last 20-30 years based around understanding complexity, and no magic wand is going to come in and change that for them, unless it can show them a benefits model that changes and enhances their careers. And at the moment, Agile's not really done that. What it's done is it says we can optimize your organization. Well, that's great. We've been trying to optimize this organization for the last 200 years, and we've got to carry on for the next 200 years trying to do the same thing. But it hasn't actually shown a benefits model to the C-suite yet. And I think and until they get that, why should they change their behavior around work?
For leaders, very often it's difficult to sort of let go of the I and embrace the we. That for the first time, it's not about them anymore. And somehow they need to set a culture in their organizations where results can be judged on the outcomes and skills building of others. So I think it's really getting that growth mindset into the core of the organization, because that changes collaboration. That's the thing. I think that actually, if it's a flatter organization, collaboration changes. And if you look at, so the Agile Business Consortium has the 9 principles of Agile leadership. And we believe strongly that these collaborative communities sit at the heart of business agility. So to really enable that collaboration, leaders need to let go and just sort of prepare the ground.
I think
Ben,
Carl,
you're
you
going to
made
say
really, So
Go on,
you
Ben.
made a really interesting point there, that C-suite don't care about Agile, and you are completely right. And we've got to be really careful where we're trying to drive this change as people with expertise in it, who are trying to ultimately make the organizations perform effectively, probably by using Agile, although I'm not married to Agile as being the only way of doing it.
Yeah.
But as people who are trying to influence this change, we've got to be very sensitive to the language that we use, because if we're talking to them about implementing Agile as almost the outcome that we're trying to achieve, we're going to completely lose their interest. We've got to talk about value. We've got to talk about business benefits. We've got to translate for them. We've got to introduce some of the terminology so they get what's going on. But ultimately, in the conversations that we're having with them, if we go in hard with the Agile language and terminology, all we're going to do is it's going to go over their heads. They're not going to care. They're going to go off and do something else that's more interesting or they perceive more value in.
And I think the other piece is that Agile is not the deliverable. The deliverable is better customer experience. The deliverable is better market entry, market ownership or segmentation. It's meeting the requirements of shareholders and investors and the analyst community and all of these sort of things. So actually being agile, even having an agile mindset while your share price falls through the floor, is a failure as far as a C-suite person goes. So there's that disconnect between us knowing that it's really valuable and useful, and the C-suite understanding how it can leverage Agile to get to the things it needs to get to according to its business strategy. And that's kind of where I am with most of the consultancy I do.
I think that's right, Carl. I'm just wondering whether maybe, it's not about Agile, but it's always about agility.
Mm-hmm.
So, the communication, the commitment, the goals, the clarity around that, and that collaboration piece.
100%.
I think that's exactly it, Pam. I think, you're uniting a team around a shared vision, and you're allowing the people with the expertise and the depth of knowledge in their specialities to come up with the right solution. And you've got to trust them to do that. But we're not completely throwing it away. The leaders are still retaining that ultimate accountability because that's their job. But it's allowing that empowerment, engagement of the team to make some of those decisions. We're not saying absolutely step away, hands off. It's treading that fine balance, which I think sometimes is where where it can be scary.
So what else did we find? Is there anything that you guys found from the data that you've been able to pull together so far? Anything that you found maybe is different? Because I know we had that over the past 2 years, actually, that's been like at the top. Is there anything else that maybe have come out and gone, oh, actually, that's changed either a little bit or that's completely opposite?
So I think one of the snippets that really jumped out to me was the increase in people relating to the statement of I'm learning a lot. It has almost turned on its head from the last survey, where last time we were looking at it, there was a very low perception of learning within individuals' roles. But now it's absolutely huge. It's a really significant result. So it's showing that people within organizations have got a much greater emphasis on their learning and their development. I'm interested to dig deeper and hear people's perspectives on it. Georgie and I were having a bit of a chat earlier about this, and one of the things Georgie called out was that perhaps this is due to the Great Resignation, that actually people were feeling dissatisfied with their jobs and their roles, and now either organizations are having to change to retain them, or people are moving to roles where they are better able to get that learning from their role. I'm sorry, Georgie, I stole your insight there, but I tried to credit you at least with it.
Don't worry, Ben. You did a much better job at articulating it, I'm sure, than I did earlier.
I wonder whether another perhaps sort of slightly different angle on that might be whether people are experiencing greater psychological safety within their organizations to say that they don't know yet. It's that yet, isn't it? That actually we don't know, we can't know the answer, but we can learn, we can experiment, we can test, we can find out.
Well, I think that's interesting because before COVID, people would have said that they had the answer. During COVID and after COVID, people are less sure because that completely threw all the rules away.
Yeah. If it's okay not to know the answer, then suddenly that opens up room for new possibilities, which opens up room for innovation.
Yeah, it does. It does.
So what was the actual survey trying to achieve this year? Was it different from last year? Because obviously it's a progression, isn't
it? So fundamentally, Georgie, do you want to take this bit?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I guess touching on what we were speaking about earlier around the importance of leadership and a lot of the opportunities from our the previous report that we did, there was a lot of opportunity there to be unlocked through focusing on leadership. And so this year we wanted to still keep some things the same. So look at how we've moved on comparatively to where we were a year and 2 years ago, but also to delve more deeply into the leadership aspect. So we're looking to understand the impact that different leadership styles might have on business agility and agile culture, and also what the business case for changing leadership styles and the key enablers to allow leaders to do that would be. And then also a little bit on looking at agile culture on company performance and resilience, just because very topical with the economic downturn and the recession environment. So I guess leadership and resilience are the two main areas we're looking at more deeply this year.
The management style is defined by the organizational construct. So if you are a hierarchical, top-down, divisional sectors, segments, organization, like Taylorist structures, then you will have a top-down leadership model usually as well that eliminates the ability for people at the work level to make decisions. So I'm just, because you mentioned leadership styles, I just wonder what leadership styles you were talking about.
So I think we can definitely draw parts of that out. We haven't asked any sort of direct questions, but we could. It would be really interesting to marry up actually what are the different areas that we've been surveying against, and how does that apply against that. I think interesting that is a challenge that a lot of organizations are and have been wrestling with for a pretty long while, but certainly over the last 4 or 5 years, I think organizations are really feeling it. It's not just we're going to implement these ways of working, but at the team level because it's more effective, or could it exist outside of IT? Maybe it could. Let's give it a go. Now we are seeing organizations, and particularly some of our work with some of the organizations who are further down their sort of transformation and maturity journey. We are looking at value streams and say, well, fundamentally, how do you need to structure yourselves to be able to effectively respond to the challenges in your market? And it's definitely something that is at the forefront of industries that are really feeling the turbulence, and organizations who are further forwards and more mature with their way of thinking.
And certainly 3-4 years ago, some major UK corporations completely changed their organizational designs, got rid of their departments, and actually created focused value streams around customer journeys, which meant that actually, quite a few people lost their jobs because there's a massive change there, because there's a lot of waste in handing work off, and that change there was dramatically reduced. But there was a lot of people that got far more focused and far more engaged in what their work was doing and the value it was delivering to customers, because they could see it. And I just think that there's a lot of those companies who are now reaping massive benefits from that organizational construct change.
And I'm not going to name industries at this point because we're still quite early into that analysis, is that we're seeing a very broad difference between different industries in their behaviors post-COVID. Some seems to be really got their shoulder behind Agile in terms of rolling it out across their organization. but some are absolute laggards, and their response, I guess, like a lot of organizations, they're recovering from COVID and trying to get themselves back into a steady state. And I think it's those industries that are suffering considerably more than others. And so when we get to it, we'll obviously name those industries. But yeah, we're just seeing a very, very broad difference between some.
I think so. Again, without naming the specific industries, I think what's been really interesting is when we look at them, it feels like for some of them it's been almost a yo-yo, because they were some of the least agile pre-COVID. Then COVID sent them super agile, and then now that we're coming out of that COVID period, they've just completely retracted. So it's been really interesting to see that almost peak and trough of some of those industries.
And yeah, you're right, because there's been there's been months now, there's been a lot of things in the news about the fact around the remote working, where you've got some organizations that have actually embraced it. That's meaning giving, a lot of workers the opportunity to have a possibly a better work-life balance. And then you've got other organizations that are kind of starting to draw it back and go, well, no, we don't need to work in this manner anymore. And it is that revert, exactly how you mentioned, thus meaning that most people are possibly leaving if they were happy with the remote working situation, that trust that is required for remote working. They're now thinking, hang on, there's a lot of other organizations that have embraced it and kept this, and it all links to obviously the financial crisis as well. People are able to save money by working remotely. They're able to be at home with their families a little bit more, but it also, I've got ideas. I've got my views for remote work, and I'm not going to go through it. But yeah, you are starting to see that happen a lot as well.
Is it interesting from a... Oh, sorry, Simon. I was going to say...
all the time, just go with it.
Interesting from a leadership perspective. I think Ben and I were chatting briefly earlier about this. Of, did people have to become more agile in the pandemic because people were remote working, and leaders almost had to empower their teams because they didn't have visibility over everything? But then actually, has that reverted? When you're then back in the office, you can see a lot of stuff, and then when things are volatile in the economy and things, are they reverting back to a more command and control because they can and everyone's around, or actually are they still empowering their teams? I think that would be interesting to see.
I think it's because
I also think that no one's created a role model, a model for an agile leader. Everyone's said we want agile leadership. We haven't told agile leaders what they are and how they're meant to work. You're meant to be a servant leader. Okay, so I like bring everyone a coffee in the morning. How does it actually work? Because I'm still responsible for, I don't know, £50 million worth of P&L. If I don't hit my targets, I get fired and I lose my pension. I'll probably lose my house. How do I, as a C-suite person, respond to this agile thing that you want me to do? It's much easier for me to do what I used to do, which is tell people to get off their backsides and deliver. So do you know what I mean? It's we kind of got these great big gaps in agile that we think someone's going to fill in for us, but no one has. And I just wonder.
I think it's coming on. I think it is coming on, Carl, because I've worked, I've done a fair bit of coaching with leaders in agile organizations. And I also think when you say that nobody's scoped agile leadership, then clearly you haven't read the Agile Business Consortium website. The professional body for business agility, folks.
Love that.
Nice plug there, thank you.
So 9 principles of agile leadership. It's all there, Carl.
No, I'm talking about an actual job description. So I have worked with an HR business partner on an agile leadership job description. We ended up with 25 of them, because actually there's lots of different C-suite.
Yeah, people. I would be nervous of templating that.
But there's also that other layer.
The thing is that no one could deploy them because it would have breached everyone's contracts.
There's also that other layer, though. You've got these organizations that actually weren't agile before the pandemic, then remarkably went agile and it benefited them. And now they're actually in the scenario of, okay, so we never had remote working or agility before. Now we have it. So we've got a mixture of people that want to come back to the office people that don't want to come back to the office, people that are 50-50 split, if they are not used to this, and this is where you've got this like little bubble of unsurety of, okay, well, I've come in on Tuesday and Thursday, and I'm actually finding this. I've come in Tuesday and Thursday, but actually the people I want to speak to, I've now got to tell them they need to come in Tuesday and Thursday because I want to speak. So I think it's that little bubble of being able to collaborate and coordinate that some of these organizations that are new to this way of working, they're just trying to still find their feet on it by still giving that flexibility. They don't want to dictate to say you have to be in these certain days. And you do actually have a lot of people out there that are like, no, I don't want to come in. There are actually quite a few people like, nah, don't want to come in. Happy where I am. So that there is a lot of that behavior and confusion, and the company's just not knowing how to manage it. That's what I've noticed. Anything else everybody would like to add?
I was just going to add that, building on what Georgie said, that the further analysis needs to back what I'm just about to say, but it would seem that for some organizations through COVID, that they built up some momentum around agile adoption and put some of the probably the low-hanging fruit into place, if there's such a thing, and then ran out of steam, or COVID ended, or basically they hadn't got to a tipping point, and that's when the retraction, their behaviors hadn't fully embedded. Last year's survey would show that there was a great deal of benefits that come out of that, even if they were just emotional or perceptive. But then they've started to tail off. But in some industries where I think it has got to that tipping point, probably because it became normalized and standard across the industry, it got over that tipping point, and now they're now seeing the benefits. So I just wonder, it'd be good to, once we get to the end of this, is to look at those industries that we predict have got over that tipping point based on our data, and which ones have retracted because they couldn't quite get there.
We're quite excited. Well, I'm glad that the survey's still open. So just everyone else who's watching, get in there. Links will be going out. It's still available. Have your say. It's important, but also it'll be really interesting. And I'm assuming that we'll get some more inside data at some point.
Yeah, for sure.
Fab. Well, thank you very much, everybody. It's an absolute pleasure always. Lovely to see you guys. And we'll speak to you very soon. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay.